participants. Hey, Bobby.
Britt.
Can we, so you didn't have any trouble? I just had to let you in.
Yep.
Okay. If I stop sharing my screen, hold on. I'm gonna make sure my advanced sharing. I'll give everyone the opportunity to share, only just because Marcia needs to share.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think it's okay. Is it okay? Would you be able to just say a few words about AOG in the beginning?
Yeah, I can do
Okay.
that.
Cool.
It wasn't a clickable link this time. You have to copy and paste it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for an age of people who were born basically clicking things, they are surprisingly unable to do stuff.
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I don't know. Online event page. Oh, I can add it. There's so many things. Oh, she's here. Cute.
Hello, Brittany.
Hi, how are you doing?
How are you? Good.
Good. Rob is here too.
Hey, Marcia,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. I see you in the lab. That is nice.
Yeah. It's so nice to have you back. Last time we had you were bioarray.
Yes.
Now we can have you again for dimension sciences. So it's awesome
Mm-hmm.
to see your career transform over the life of our group. It's kind of fun to follow, right?
Uh-huh. That's good. Thank you for inviting me back. So I'm looking forward. I got some slides. And I was telling Brittany, the idea is that I'm probably going to give like a 15 to 20 minutes introduction. And
Okay.
then mostly will be questions and answers.
Fantastic. I mean, Britt and I were discussing last time that the first time that you came, it was very interactive and people had lots of questions. So I am hoping it's the same thing. So
Yeah. And if they don't have questions, I have a list of questions I can answer for them.
I was just looking up your career trajectory in bio on LinkedIn. This institute that you went to, the Institute of Biophysics, Carlos Chagas Fijo,
Uh-huh.
like that.
Filho.
Okay.
Filho.
So that, okay. It's named after a physicist, biophysicist.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So he described the leishmania, which is a parasite in Brazil. And his specialty was electronic microscopy. So.
Oh, okay. Nice.
You look very nice, Brittany.
Well, thank you. You too. Nice to clean up once in a while.
Right. That's good. Okay, so let me, do you want to test quickly that I have the...
You should be able to share. I just changed that setting. So go for it if you want to. I have a slide and to share in the beginning, and we're just going to introduce the group. So people who don't know the group, and then you can, I'll stop sharing and then you can take over from there.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
yes.
Okay. And then, okay, you see the full slide?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I will stop share. So right now I know. And you see the full slide?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. We had all sorts of technical problems with Zoom. So.
Oh.
That's yeah. Next, I will be able to give like seminars about all
Yeah.
troubleshooting.
It's good. It's good. You know, learning curve.
So you back to the lab too, Brittany?
If I have a scheduled experiment. Yep. So I finished that last week, 2 weeks ago. Oh, wow. 2 weeks ago. I'm just waiting for my mice to grow up a little bit more before I get to the next one.
Okay. So you do animal models?
Yeah, we're focused on osteoarthritis in my lab.
Okay. And you have a transgenic mice?
Nope.
No.
No, we're just
You
we
just
use the different.
induce?
I'm sorry.
You just induce things, or
Yeah,
okay.
basically. She's more interested in developing therapeutics, so we're not necessarily interested in the biomechanism of certain things that contribute to OA, although that is obviously something that is important to keep in mind as we're targeting different systems to alleviate pain or some of the other symptoms that come with OA. So yeah, we don't use any of the knockouts, but we're working with a whole group of people at UConn that are interested in biological mechanisms of osteoarthritis, since we don't know what causes the induction of the disease. We just know that it occurs over years and decades, and then eventually manifests as the debilitating, cartilage loss and bone deformations that occur from just the loss of all those articular tissues. So it's cool to be on the other side of things, to not be just worried about mechanism, but also to be thinking clinically. If we're going to talk about these populations, why don't we try to produce something that could actually be therapeutically relevant. So that's nice to be on that end. My dissertation was focused very heavily on mechanisms of pain during inflammation. So yeah, it's good.
Yes.
Okay, I'm slowly admitting people. I guess I'll share the slide a while. I can't do that. I can't do. Can I do both?
And people are slowly trickling in.
Okay.
So
it
it's,
takes a
I
minute.
see that you guys grew up in terms of like, you have a name and a website.
Yeah, that was a lot of
Awesome.
work since we started that. The website we started in October last year. But because of COVID, if we were feeling like, wow, we were doing so well, picking up with having people come and give talks. And then actually COVID made it easier because now we don't have to worry about anyone traveling anywhere. They just need to pop on for an hour or so. So we're making the full transition to being an online career resource now, which is pretty exciting. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is. There is a lot of good things coming out of this pandemic. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, we just got the Instagram account too, which is exciting.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I won't lie. I am taking some of the things we've learned from Dimension Sciences and helping the career group with.
That's great.
Yeah, it's been
I
good to practice some of the things I've learned in a different way. Still helping.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to wait we'll wait maybe, like 2 more minutes, but I don't want to wait too much longer.
I know it's the academic timeline, right?
Now it's worse, right?
Right.
Come on.
That's okay.
We're all guilty of it. That happens,
It
right?
happens. It does.
I should take my mask off briefly.
Show us your face.
No more in the queue, Britt?
There were, it's intermittent, so right now, no, there isn't. But I will continue to watch as we get started to allow people to enter. So
Yeah,
if that's okay.
I feel like a notification. I've never been on that end of a Zoom call, so I don't know how it works over there. So
Yeah, I don't think I set any setting where, well, we were already past the start time, so that no one could enter after we started, but I think we're good.
okay.
All right, cool.
No, we can get started.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I just want to give a brief introduction for those of you who don't know who we are. So I'm Pievsky. On the other end of this call, who will introduce Dr. Fournier is Britt Knight. We started this career development group almost 2 years ago now. Postdoc and myself, and the group has expanded. It's now 5-fold larger than it was. It's very exciting, but the whole purpose of our group is to expose students to new career opportunities and expand what you can do with your knowledge of, having a PhD. So you're not limited to just becoming a PI or going straight into industry. You can do so many things. And so Britt will introduce Dr. Fournier, but I just want to say, check out our social media pages. We have a website. It's a WordPress blog, and we have many featured articles about some of our previous guests, as well as some advice. And new today is our Instagram, and we'll have things like Tip Tuesdays, featuring different things that will help you find careers, to featured careers and featured scientists. So with that, Britt, take it away.
Will do. I'm admitting people as we're going, so bear with me. So I'm very excited to share with you today our guest speaker. We're meeting Marcia Fournier today for our second online seminar talk. Marcia is, has a pretty impressive career trajectory, and I'll let her talk about that a little bit, but I want to introduce her all the same. It's very exciting. So Marcia got her PhD from the Department of Biophysics in Rio de Janeiro at, I'm going to butcher it, the Carlos Chagas Fijo Institute of Biophysics, and then later traveled to do an international exchange program in the greater Boston area, which she might talk about a little bit more. And then she postdoced a little bit at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. She worked as a principal scientist for a little while, an adjunct professor at the College Staten Island SUNY system. And now she was then the founder of and CEO board member of the BioArray Genetics startup company that was actually hosted here in Connecticut's Technology Incubator Program. And she did that for, quite a while, a few years, like upwards of a decade. And then recently, almost not quite a year ago, she decided to found a nonprofit organization that aims to help provide educational, financial support, and foster education for underrepresented students, postdocs, graduate students in STEM sciences, but not exclusive to. And without further ado, we will let her tell you a little bit more about what she does. The aim of this conversation today is a conversation. So at some point, she'll probably encourage you to ask questions, or you can also message and I can facilitate the conversation that way. So don't be shy. If you have questions or any kind of interest, she's a wealth of knowledge. So I'm gonna pass over the screen share to Marcia, and let's get started.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yes, of course.
I'm going to share my screen. Well, as Brittany said, this is more of a conversation. I will give a brief introduction about myself, but don't feel free to send on the chat questions. And probably going to be, my introduction will be about 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And this first slide actually describes a little bit of my trajectory. Even if you don't see a path, you can make a new path. And in the end, it's all about new challenges and get smarter. So let me see if I can pass this. And so, as Brittany said, I came to this country about 23 years ago as a PhD student with a scholarship from my country, Brazil. And I was supposed to stay 3 months, but ended up a series of other scholarships made me stay here 23 years. And here I am. At the Dana-Farber already, I started, I was in oncology, so I came to study. My PhD was on circulating tumor cells, which today has a much nicer name, a liquid biopsies, a much sexy name. So I was doing that on the 90s, and I was already interested in biomarkers. In other words, molecules that could identify cancer patients in a blood sample. And so if you ask me, and I will start with questions because this is about to be interactive. So if I start with the question, why, when, how I became ready to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to answer you, I'm still waiting for that day. I'm not ready yet. But I can also tell you that since my very early days of my career, during my PhD at Dana-Farber, I was already interested in translational research. So I was really interested in questions, scientific questions that could be translated to patient benefit. And as I mentioned, looking for markers to detect circulating tumor cells. And I had the opportunity to work with doctors in lung cancer and breast cancer. So we could apply our technology to patient samples and to find those biomarkers. So I became really passionate about personalized or individualized medicine, as I like to say. And I think everybody today is pretty familiar with the concept that in treatments, like the one size fits all treatment is really very inefficient. So when I started bioradionetics, I brought this knowledge and passion to a company, and I was interested in optimizing, making treatment decisions better and more precise for doctors and patients. I want to find, for instance, one example, which was exactly the question, like the specific question we are working on the company is on breast cancer patients when they first diagnosis, they are not metastatic, so they are in the group that could really have good outcomes. Those patients, great majority of them would have as their first treatment a standard chemotherapy, but only 25% of them would completely respond to the chemotherapy. So that was puzzling to me, only 25%. And so that is a reality for oncology. The bar is really, really low. And 25% is a success. Taxol is one of the most successful drugs, and Taxol-based treatments is exactly what those patients get as a first-line standard of care treatment. So I became interested in finding who are the other 75%, because if I could identify those beforehand, they could go to a next level treatment, more aggressive regimens of treatment, or a target therapy that could then they could skip that treatment that would not benefit them. So that was the whole concept. But as I said, the passion for this individualized medicine came from early ages. So we're looking then how to stratify these patients based on the patient biology. And so in the company, we developed a technology that we could analyze genetic material. In this case, we analyzed gene expression at the RNA level in blood and tumor samples. And then these were the tumor samples were the diagnostic biopsies. So when like the patient comes and do that diagnostic biopsy, we would take that same biopsy and look at the RNA. And then we developed gene expression technology such as RNA-seq in combination with machine learning to interpret the data of a panel of genes that were our proprietary panel of biomarkers that could tell us which patients would respond or not to that standard chemotherapy. So that is, but to get to this technology, so we had then as I said, a big problem, the problem of not treating patients well in the first time, and only 25% answering of responding to that first treatment, a big problem. Doctors and patients acknowledged that was a big problem. And then we had a technology that was feasible to answer that question. And then, but we also had a differentiator, like was the type of genes we were looking for. So a lot of the technologies, they look for all genes, but we decided to first do a biology survey. So we actually studied the breast epithelial cells and look for genes that could be characteristic of the healthy breast epithelial cell. So we focus on the organized healthy cells to look for gene expression that will like characteristic of that organization healthy state, if you will. And then we apply that panel to our samples. And then this was the first publication that we had. So we had, I think, a little bit below 300 patients that for this first study. And we had here breast cancer patients, and these are 325 genes that came from this biology model of cell organization and healthy state of the breast epithelial cell. So the genes and the patients, and when we applied in an unsupervised way in this graph, we saw that we got two clusters of patients, a group that had good prognosis and a group of patients with poor prognosis based on our gene expression panel. And so this is the survival curve showing that the patients that were in this blue group, they had much better survival than the patient in the brown group. So that was the first indication that these genes, not only they were markers of that healthy biology, but patients that presented that health biology in the tumor samples, they tend to have a better prognosis than patients that were contrasting to that good health biology. So that was our first publication, and during the life of the company, we published many. So that comes the second question I get a lot from people when they ask about my transition from being a scientist to be an entrepreneur. So this was my first company. We founded based, again, novel biology in a big question. That is a question of making treatments more accurate, better, faster for patients. One of the questions I get a lot is like, do you still publish? Do you still do research? So this is an example of publication and research, really scientific research done inside the company. So back to my original questions, why, when, how I became ready to be an entrepreneur. So really the answer is multi-factorial answer. I think you will know if you're ready. One, you have to have a technology that is novel and is doing something better, cheaper, or faster. So in our case, with the technology we developed, not only will benefiting the patients to having potential better outcomes if the treatment decisions were done better, the patients would have better outcomes. We also calculated billions of dollars in cost savings by having that bifurcation or stratification of patients that would respond or not respond to the standard of care chemotherapy. And then the technology could meet solve a big problem, an unmet need in the medicine, and that potentially would help patients and doctors in their clinical practice. We had that. And also we had a big market. There are a lot of patients that could benefit from our technology around the world. So, and we also thought that we would first apply this technology to breast cancer, but it could be applied to any other type of cancer in theory. And then the fourth factor, doctors and patients wanted that. They acknowledged that they had a problem, and they wanted new tests, new molecular tests. And there was a market for it. There were other companies that are already developing molecular tests, and they were successful. So these are some of the things I would ask. If you're thinking to be an entrepreneur and start a company, do you have a technology that is novel? Are you solving a big problem? Do you have a big market? And are your customers ready for it? And these are some of the basic questions you should ask to become an entrepreneur. I didn't ask this question in a formal way, as I'm telling you today. It was very organic and natural, but these were the questions we, myself and the team, thought a lot through the development of the company. And then I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the difficulties we faced as a war inherent to my industry with biogenetics. It was very hard to protect intellectual property because molecular diagnostics become really hard landscape for patenting tests. especially molecular tests, based on the myriad and proteinous court cases. And so, but we managed to actually have issued patents. The regulatory landscape was very challenging because the FDA put on the table, took out of the table, forth and back, guidelines that would regulate molecular diagnostics, and they are still doing this game. I think now it's off the table, but they keep doing that, which scare investors because it's like a risk. We don't know what will be the rules and whatnot. And reimbursement was another big challenge for the whole molecular diagnostic industry, and it is still a challenging because there is no transparent rule. Private payers, Medicare, they have different ways of evaluating molecular diagnostics. And then again, this turns in a big risk. And then the other big problem in our industry was a requirement for clinical trials, like we will drugs. So for molecular diagnostics, we will require to have 2 or 3 clinical trials, and not only retrospective but prospective clinical trials, which made really not always the return of, on the investment for investors a win. So in other words, molecular diagnostic companies, there are many of them surviving and overcoming these challenges, but it became a landscape that was a little bit adverse to innovation because of regulatory reimbursement and also the requirement for investment of long timelines and expensive to develop, and it still is. So these are some of the difficulties. Now, what I want to share with you guys a little bit the things that we accomplished as a team at Biomarker Genetics. So we raised multiple rounds of financing from angel investors to venture capital Series B. The first time I raised funds was from family and friends. It started with mostly like a friend and a professor at Harvard Medical School, investing on the company and pretty much investing on me and my co-founder. And then from there, we raised funds from angel groups. And then the last stages of the company development, we had venture capital. And then we built a multidisciplinary team, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of at Biomarker Genetics, including researchers, technologists, laboratory people, business, medical oncology. So it's really rewarding to build a team and work with the team day to day. And we established mutually beneficial partnerships, which if you think to develop any life science technology, is a lot of capital, is very intense, capital intense, if you will. And so even being successful raising funds, we had to be frugal. And these mutually beneficial partnerships were crucial for the development stages of the product and the company. And these included partnerships with service providers, with clinical oncologists, that many of our clinical studies were collaborative studies and didn't require us to raise funds for it. One example was the iSpy clinical trial, which is an NCI-sponsored trial. And by collaborating with the iSpy trial, we were able to generate proof of concept data without having to raise funds from investors. So these are some examples of these mutual beneficial partnerships and how they impact the company life in a very positive way and non-dilutive in terms of needing more capital from investors. And then we did get multiple patents issues despite the challenging landscape, as I mentioned. And we, one of the last milestones in the company was to receive the regulatory approval of our first molecular diagnostic, which was an RNA test for estrogen receptor. And this was an approval as a laboratory developed test, which is a CLIA approval. And that was very challenging because we did it with a small team. Usually companies have a whole department to handle regulatory approvals, and we had 13-member team doing everything. So now, personally, what was the biggest difficulties for me as a person in this to grow this company? So fundraising never gets easy. So it actually gets harder because the milestones, the timelines are like bigger milestones, shorter timelines, it gets very demanding as you go from angel capital to venture capital. And it doesn't get easier, it gets harder. And then a business, what I found when I was in science, and probably this is some of the experience you see in the laboratories. Laboratories are very diverse, at least in my experience, my whole career, being in Boston, in the Bay Area, California, in a big pharma company, GlaxoSmithKline. Always in a scientific environment was very diverse environment in terms of gender and racial diversity, mostly gender diversity. Racial is another subject we can talk later. Less racial, but gender for sure, gender diversity you can see in the scientific setting. However, when I transitioned to entrepreneurial and business setting, there is a much less diversity representation. For instance, when I was transitioned from going to scientific conferences to business conferences, I went from being like about half of the crew to be about 10% of representation. So in a room, many times I counted how many women CEOs were in the room, and was pretty much 1 to 10, 2 to 10, when was like an extremely rare conference with more diversity. So it's very striking to me, that difference. And also this is backed up by studies, and it haven't changed in the past 10 years. Also, raising capital as a women CEO is much harder than as a man, white man CEO. That's also well known, and several studies backing with data. So that is definitely a gender bias in the entrepreneur and business world, and I felt that on my skin. And then the third challenge I want to, first biggest difficulties was how you communicate your science. You go from having presentations that are 40 slides long to having to tell everything about your company, your business, and your technology in 3 minutes. So science subjects are complex, but communication is what can bring you capital, can help you to build a team, partnerships, everything I said before. So science technologies, they take longer to get ready. The answers are never black and white, yes or no. There is everything in clinical trials, in biological systems. There is always a gray range, and there is a big gap in information between scientists, business people, and lay audience. So with that, I'm going to go really quickly because I already passed on my 20 minutes, as I said. I started Dimension Sciences really to tackle some of these problems. Dimension Science mission is to include minorities in science and technology fields, including innovation and business, but based on technology business base, and really create opportunities of higher education for minorities. And I'm speaking about all minorities, racial and gender minorities, but also socioeconomic minorities. So I'm going to go really quickly some of the programs we already developed in the past 9 months So Dimension Sciences was established in November 2019. We got a first funding from the JP Morgan charitable funding. And with that allowed us to grow some pilot programs. For instance, one of our programs that we're really proud of is the COVID-19 scholarships in Brazil. And these were scientists already with a master and doctoral degrees working in a task force for COVID-19 in Brazil, but they were working without any compensation. Actually, NPR reported recently that in the US, there are also scientists working without compensation. So we want to expand this program to the US and Canada, and really support our scientists and researchers that are in the front line to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. And then another program that we're really happy with it is our mentoring program, Dimension Science Advice, Coaching and Training and Supporting Program, which we provide to all scholars, but some of the events are public and you guys are going to be invited for it. We have about once a month or twice a month a public event that is part of this mentoring program. Everybody's invited. We're creating programs in the Instagram, like the Dimension Science TV. Is science basically explaining science in a lay language. So we are living in the COVID-19 pandemic. It's horrible, but it also is an opportunity for us scientists because the eyes is on science. Everybody's interested in science. My friends in Facebook, they're posting graphs and talking about science. So it's a good time to communicate with the public about the scientists, what the scientists do, and who they are. Scientists are not only the people with lab coats and playing with test tubes in the laboratory. So let's show the face of the scientists. And so that is a little bit what we do in the Dimension Science TV. We invite scientists, research scientists, medical scientists. Sometimes we invite just journalists, and then we talk about a variety of topics in science. As I said, we are putting together public webinars with the same, and science campaigns with kind of the same goal to explain science and explain who is the scientist to the lay, to the business world. And then also I want to mention the Global Citizen Award, which is an international research exchange, and is similar to actually what I've done when I was a PhD student. I came to this country with a scholarship, so we want to bring people from Brazil and other countries to do science here for a period of time during their graduate school, but also get Americans abroad for the part of the graduate schools and experience how you do research in other countries. This is on hold now for obvious reasons because of COVID-19. And then we also write articles, expertise articles in our stories. And we've been talking about future programs, which is work with a younger generation. Our programs being focused on young professionals, but we also creating new programs targeting kids. So we plant the seed. Science is fun. Science is possible for anyone to pursue a scientific career. So, and I will stop here, but I want to stop by saying that Dimension Science is a volunteer-based organization. So we invite everyone that would like to have an experience in a nonprofit organization to work with us and then learn a little bit how you grow a nonprofit from the inside out. And with that, I will thank you everybody for and welcome your questions. You can ask me continue questions about how I became an entrepreneur. You can ask anything you like about your careers, and we'll try to answer the best I can.
Thank you, Marcia. Looks
Questions?
like okay, so we have one question so far. This is good. If you were able to write an autobiography, what would the title be?
Okay, wow, that is a difficult question. Well, you guys give me an idea. um, I think that if I don't know actually whether it will be a title of an autobiography. I think that I definitely would be things that again, the questions that are very close to my heart is inclusion of scientists in our society and understanding who is the scientist. And so it will be something along the lines as a scientist's trajectory and how I turn into an entrepreneur. So something along those lines.
Food for thought.
But if you have any ideas, please send to me.
Sure, of course. We'll be collecting those. Other questions? You can ask anything.
And I can share some of the questions I got from past conferences that I've been. So a lot of people ask me, what does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? Again, it's a difficult question. If you ask that to 10 different entrepreneurs, probably going to get 10 different answers. So I'm going to give you my answer that is based on my experience alone. So one thing is that I say is that is important is being flexible. Very rare the plan you had the first day will be the plan, like will be the same plan in few months. So nothing goes as planned. Everything takes longer and costs more. So I learned that being flexible and being able to adapt to your plan based on knowledge, and this is a daily basis. And that comes with my second thinking. I'll give you 4 things that the second thing I think was important for me was being curious. And so try to learn from your team every day. This will help you to keep your competitive advantage. Learn from what other companies are doing, from what academic researchers are doing on your field. So be curious. And be curious too about your plan. Is your plan is still the best plan? And every day that can change a little bit, but it's not a change that you're going to do just for the sake of changing, but based on knowledge. So, and to get that knowledge, you need to be curious. And then the third thing I want to talk is about being resilient and never takes a no personally. One thing I learned is a lot of times people say no for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes they don't understand what you're doing. Sometimes they need more time. So never take no's personally. Actually try to find out why that was a no. And that could be a grant, that could be a funding source, or that could be a partnership. Try to find out why it was no. And I learned that many times by doing that, a lot of the no's became yeses with time. And that is part of being a successful entrepreneur, at least for me. And then fourth, I think you need to be able to mobilize people to a cause and ask the why are you doing something? And so for me, it was very important hours to be asking why and being passionate about it. And I think the ability of mobilizing people to help you, and that is also needs you to acknowledge you have weakness, that you cannot do everything but on your own. You don't know everything, so you need other people to join you and help with that cause. And I think that was very important for me to acknowledge what I didn't know, and then by acknowledge what I didn't know, I was able to find people that knew a lot more than me and work with me. And any other questions?
Yes, we have a few. So there's a question from the crowd. Is there any part of being in academia that you miss? What is the most rewarding part of being part of a nonprofit?
So from academia, I think like some things we transport from academia to being an entrepreneur. And so maybe I will start for the things I don't miss, but end up being the same when you're in a company. Like 1 out of 10 experiments actually work. So the frustrations of that failure, but that actually prepares you to be an entrepreneur. So being like dealing with that type of failure and not facing is not a really failure. So what I miss most about being academia is a lot. So what I want to say that in a way that in academia we learn to challenge each other. So when you go to a talk by other scientists, you usually are thinking of everything he didn't do. So that critique set of mind, not always is good. Seeing is positive in the business world. The business world, investors, for instance, they want to hear you know everything. So when you say you don't know, you have to be careful how you say that. Which in academia you can say I didn't do this experiment, I don't know. In academia, you actually, when you present a data, you present all disclaimers that what that data actually means and everything it doesn't mean, which is 100 things, and everything that could be wrong, and how many times you're going to have to do that in many different ways to be certain that that conclusion is actually valid. You have to simplify that. So I miss a little bit of that understanding for that complexity of science and all the gray shades, as I mentioned. So that will be one thing I miss the most. You have to simplify things a lot, but not simplify to a point that you lose the accuracy of what the scientific topic you're working on. So you still have to be fair to science, but simplify it to and look at it as 1,000 times a high level. Not always you can go deeper as you wish. And I think the question had a second part. What I like about working in a nonprofit, I think, is like the opportunity to give back and interacting with science in a different way, pretty much branching out from oncology to all sciences and being in a position to enable other scientists.
Nice, good answers. Oops, sorry. Next question. How did you come up with the initial idea for BioArray?
So as I mentioned, there was like a work that was kind of ongoing, my passion for biomarkers and how biomarkers could inform about the biology of someone, could inform about a clinical outcome. It could be a prognostic outcome, a treatment outcome, a risk assessment. And so that concept that someone's biology could guide clinical decision, that was what was the driving force to start the company. And then my co-founder at the time, Kathy Martin, a scientist from the Harvard Medical School, she developed a new way of interpreting data using machine learning tools. Actually, her and one of other very early time scientists of BioArray, David McGee, he was a visa analyst. So he analyzed the risks of people not paying their Visa credit card. So that combination of her way of interpreting data and his statistics and the way some of the statistics he applied in the financial world, that kind of create a new way for us to look at the patient biology. And that was like really the start of the company, when we realized we have not only a new set of genes, but we also had some new technology to interpret that set of genes and what it would mean for a patient clinical outcome.
So then I have a follow-up question for you about this. So, you know, what advice would you have for someone who thinks this is a really cool and idea, you know, entrepreneurship and creating clinical diagnostics in one shape or form, or any kind of invention? What would you say to someone who thinks that, you know, maybe that's a little out of reach, maybe I'm not capable of doing such a thing? She, you know, came up with such a smart idea. What would you say to that person?
Well, I can tell you, like, when we did that, I think our first test, like, you can say, yeah, this is really new. So I think that is actually a very good question. Anyone that if you think you have a great idea and have a new technology, ask the question, is it really new? Is it really needed? And what problem I'm solving? So I think that asking these questions is a very good thing. It's not a question of doubting yourself. It is a question of testing your hypothesis that you have a technology that is worth a company and investment of money and time. And so the way we put our hypothesis to proof was first talking to some of our colleagues in science first. And then we also talked to some people in the business side about it. But the big test was to get someone to actually invest money on it. So once we said, we found out, okay, a lot of the scientists we talk and say, yeah, this is really, you have something here. And then some of the business people also were saying that there is a big market and it's saving money, so it's solving a big problem. So we got some of those endorsements, but then the big proof was that someone is actually willing to invest on it. So I think that is when it really becomes a company, because people may support you in many different ways. But like, think about yourself, to give money to something, it goes through a different place in your brain. So I think these were the two tests that we went through. But when we got our first investor, and it's still in the friends and family, it's okay. But someone is willing to, that is not your mother, it can be family, but not your mother. Someone else besides you and your mother decide to invest on you. I think that is a good sign. Then you have some, like, you may not have still certainty, but you definitely have incentive to move forward. You have your friends endorsements, so you pass some like the friendly critiques from the science and business side, and you have someone willing to put money on it. So I would say that there's a good way to test. But again, if you talk to 5 other entrepreneurs, they will have different answers to that. But I think a common answer is really try to question. So it's not doubting yourself, but it's a good thing to question yourself on those main basic things. Are you really solving a problem? Is the way of solving a problem really new? You're going to make it faster, cheaper, better for someone. And then stays like economically viable. Is this a big market?
Awesome. Next question. What time commitment did you make to Dimension Sciences while you were transitioning into entrepreneurship? How did you balance working while starting up?
So again, I had a unique situation where I could dedicate full time to my startup and now to Dimension Sciences. But very early on, I got some financing that would supply some basic needs. But I think that a lot of my colleagues, there were many different ways you can. So in the very early days of BioRay, when we didn't have money to take salaries, I still had a job and I work on the weekends on BioArray. And this went for probably about a year that BioArray was really incubated in our homerooms. Well, not now, everybody is incubating your homerooms, but at the time on the weekends. And the weekends we work on BioArray, but I still had a job. So that is a way of doing it. I think if you're in academia, you can find a situation that especially if the technology comes from your university, you have a situation where you can still have an academic position, but already working in the startup for a certain time effort that the university would allow you to do that. So there are many ways that you can deal with that transition in terms of still be able to be financially viable, especially if you have a family. When I started BioArray, I already had 3 kids. When I came from my PhD, I already had 2 kids. So there are always ways, and again, recruiting help. But to recruit that help, I think, again, back to that first question, you have to convince yourself that it's worth your time, your dedication.
Well, to spin off of what you just mentioned about balancing your private and your professional life, how did you go about that? What advice would you give to someone who might be sort of battling these 2 jobs? And now it's harder because those 2 jobs they might be at home or versus having to go to work in the previous paradigm pre-COVID. But yeah, what are some of the advice you would give?
Well, again, recruiting help is a big part. So that's why I think one thing I didn't mention during my introduction was the importance of networking and mentorship. So I think there's 2 big things that I advise everybody to seek. So mentors can really help you on balancing this period of like your personal life and your professional life and transitioning careers. I think for every postdoc goes through it, even if you go seeking for a academic faculty position, or if you're looking for industry jobs, or thinking about starting your business, is a transition moment. Postdocs are already like, I think is like, I don't hear this period of time in any other career but science. You're a postdoc, you're a pretty capable scientist already, you have tons of publications from your PhD, you have experience, but you're still working as a student. So it's a unique situation. So that's why I think during your postdoc, one of the things you should be concentrating is building a professional network. And not only on your area, but really try to expand your professional network to other areas. Talk to your competitors too. And then seek for mentorship, because this will help you to find the next step of your career, the next opportunities. So I can't stress enough how building a network and not only professional network, a mentorship network helped me through my life. I had amazing mentors, many of them that through my career, and I think that sometimes I own them my sanity.
I definitely have a question. How do you find a mentor? It seems people say it's very important, but does it just sort of happens, or do you have to formally ask someone to be that role for you? How do you do that?
Some mentorship relationships happens naturally, but all others, like you can go and ask. Like, let's say you recognize that you need advice in a certain area or topic, either personally or professionally. So really look for people that mind-like to you, that you can talk to. And you can really ask, like, can I spend some time just talking to you about my career, and sometimes just to have someone to listen to you, someone that has experience that they can share the experience with you. It's already a form of mentorship. There are more formal mentorships, and there are programs that provide that. But if you thinking about like an advisor or just someone you can talk more informally, there is no problem asking. Just identify few people, and then say, can I talk to you from time to time about my career? So this is another thing. You have to be a little bit proactive and forward. It's hard sometimes to come to someone and say, hey, you want to be my mentor? But you can come and say, introduce yourself, talk about yourself, and say, well, I would love to talk to you about your experience, you got here. And then sometimes it's a good icebreaker, let the person talk about themselves. And then if you feel the conversation went well and you can talk about multiple things, maybe like try to schedule another session with that person, and then go for a coffee together. Then maybe later on you can do more formal ask in terms of like if you need more formal mentorship. But sometimes just to go out with people, well, now like go Zoom with people.
Go Zoom.
Go Zoom with people and say, yeah, do you have 15 minutes to spare, and talk about your experience, and I'm having difficulty. So something like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question. Was there another scientist, particularly a woman, who inspired you during your career trajectory, or even today? Could be multiple people, but does someone come to mind?
Yeah, there are many people that inspire me. So I can tell few. I'm going to tell about two people that were very inspired to me. One of them is actually not a woman. It was a man, Arthur Porty. He has passed away already when he was 96, amazingly, very weak at 96 years old. And Arthur Porty was an emeritus professor at Harvard Medical School. But he was extremely humble and a brilliant scientist, and he really inspired me in science, but also as a person. And then Mina Bissell, because of her innovative way of thinking, when she gives talks, you guys should probably invite her. She's now spent her career just giving talks around, and she is one of the pioneers in the microenvironment, tumor microenvironment. She was one of the first people that published showing how the microenvironment can change how tumor cells behave. So she was very inspired to me, again, as an innovator and someone that thinks out of the box and is not afraid of speak up and actually think out of the box. When everybody in the 80s, 90s will focus on human genome, DNA mutations, she was talking about microenvironment. Nobody want to hear about microenvironment. People want to hear about DNA mutations. But she was not afraid of it. So she inspired, definitely these are the two people that inspired me in science and business.
Excellent. Just one last question, and then we'll just wrap up. How did you know it was time to leave BioRate and make this transition to this new part of your career?
Well, I think, as I said, some of the difficulties inherent to the industry made BioRay a inviable business in terms of the time that the company needed to fully develop a commercial viable product, and also the capital investment that would need. So we're talking about $50 million, $80 million in the next round of financing. So I think that that was the time. So when we reached the regulatory approval, I felt that I took the company to a place that was like my goal was to start the company, prove that the technology, we developed the product and we got our regulatory approval, but take from there to a more commercial entity was not my sweet spot in terms of what I aimed for my career. Maybe for in another situation would be, but it was a really reflection that where I was, and I think I got to a good place that I took the company from just having the research and technology to having a regulatory approved product, and I felt like this is a good time for me to transition to the next level or next step of my career. And I was really already very much interested in this giving back, especially as an immigrant, women immigrant entrepreneur in this country, and some of the current situation in terms of the opportunities for immigrants and minorities in this country. So I felt that was my heart was closer to this starting new things. So I really entrepreneurial spirit. I like to start new things and take it to a point, and then other people can take from that point on.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I guess I'll put my video back on. It's gonna be so weird just talking to yourself.
It is that the thing I miss about our in-person conferences, being able to see everybody. Unfortunately, I could not see all of you, but if you have other questions, feel free to send me through Brittany or Rob, and I hope this was helpful to you in some way.
Absolutely. Thank you again. I'm just going to share my screen to wrap up. We have another event coming up in 2 weeks. We're going to meet Tim Hammond. He's a lab head at Sanofi, which is a global health care leader. His expertise is in neurodegeneration. So this event's going to be July 22nd at 3 p.m. if you're interested in industry lab scientist positions. Look out for the Eventbrite registration for this next seminar Q&A session in 2 weeks. And we're just plugging for anyone who wants to join the team. If you're creative and you're looking for an outlet to video blog, coordinate some of these events, reach out to people. We're just looking for people that are interested in sharpening their communication and leadership skills. What better way than to be part of the planning process to meet these professionals and connect with them, increasing your network among other skills that are really important for that post or beyond the PhD life in whatever career you decide to embark on. So with that, I think that is
one more thing.
Oh, yep. Sorry, Rob.
So, I mean, even if you can't get involved or it's a time commitment, if you like what we're doing, share our stuff. I mean, it's all about word of mouth. So if you found something helpful, tell your friends about it. It's all about sharing it online, and we really appreciate anything that you guys can do for us. So.
Absolutely. This is supposed to be just a coordinated effort to help everyone else, help everyone out. So awesome. Well, it's with that. I think we will end the session. Thank you so much, Marcia, for hanging out with us today and answering our questions and providing some advice. So
yeah, and congratulations for this. What you guys are doing is great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.